So they dropped the appeal commission, appellate board, however you're supposed to say that, they upheld the findings. By findings, I mean the process was done correctly. Their lab results are, whatever the term you want to use is, we trust the lab results. They did in fact break the rule as far as tire doping goes, is what the board said. But the board decided to drop the suspensions because I guess they decided it was too harsh, or what exactly? Like, did y'all glean any information from what led them to decide to drop the suspensions?
Okay, so let's back up. What Ryan Carter says he think the reasoning, this is coming straight from the board, I don't know, but what he said was that the penalty is too harsh because for two reasons. One, we're no longer dealing with the chemicals that they were dealing with whenever these penalties started, right?
They're not as dangerous a chemical.
There is a less dangerous chemical. It's not people cooking up, crazy recipes in their kitchen, or shop, maybe something along those lines, right? Like, so it's less dangerous. Whereas before they were using stuff
cancer causing agents,
which opens up a whole nother can of worms.
It does.
It's not that dangerous.
Well, we outlawing it.
I don't know. Like, rules have to be changed. And our rule book is a growing, evolving, living, breathing, like our Constitution is a living, breathing document. Is what people that really study constitutional law will tell you. It is constantly changing. Rule books, kind of need to be the same. And maybe are we to a point that the chemicals aren't that so bad that they need to just be like the death penalty if you're using them, right? Because they're so bad and could cause so much harm. I don't know, but all I'm saying is that opens up a can of worms of, now we need to reevaluate, how bad this really is to be using these chemicals. And, the fact that you have Brian Carter, CEO of World Racing Group, essentially alluding to that it's not like it used to be, right?
Well, he discredited the argument.
Yeah, it totally discredits the argument that we need to keep these away from people, right? And, protect our people in the sport from these harmful chemicals. The rule, that's something anytime, you would like to have a rule changed before it becomes an issue. So if that, if that should have been evaluated beforehand, so I don't know. I'm not saying that was that they shouldn't have downgraded the penalties because of that reasoning, because the rule is a rule and it was already written. I don't really know. Like, I just think that's something that is going to cause, we're going to have, as a sport, kind of evaluate going forward.
Well, it's, if y'all saw, I sent y'all a screenshot. RTJ, Ricky Thornton Jr., commented on Facebook somewhere. He was replying to someone else in a group that agreed with the decision to lower the suspension. RTJ comments on there that I think, you know what? I'm going to pull it up because I don't want to say what he didn't say. You know what I mean? I don't want to misquote him here. So a slap on the wrist is the new outcome. Might as well make it legal. I mean, that's kind of my thoughts too, is like, if you're not making it, so basically what they're saying is, we think it should be a less of a penalty for your first offense, right? Is kind of what they decided. We shouldn't end your season or, ruin your season for a first offense. Well, so now you're giving everybody a pass, basically. Like, it's no different, other than a fine. It's no different than coming up light at the scales, right?
So there's two issues. There's another issue here that y'all might have mentioned while I was away. But it is not just about we've lowered the severity because the chemicals aren't as bad as they used to be. They also mentioned that there's no way to know what happened, where the tire was, who had custody of the tire before that sample ended up in the bag, right? So, in what I think, because I've heard this elsewhere in talking with people about this whole situation, is there's starting, people, and again, this could all be people raising concerns because they're trying to get themselves, make themselves look better. But, there is a concern that what if, someone else put something on the tire without me knowing, the racer? What if, that tire,
Hoosier exchanges tires. I've been seeing that. Like, if you return a tire and then they'll resell it to someone, I've seen that.
Yeah. Or if a crew guy that, for what, like, I mean, a disgruntled employee, says, hey, this is how I'm going to get you, put some.
Yeah. If Joseph really made Jesse mad.
Right. Like, I mean, what it's saying is they feel, or at least this is the way I interpreted it, is that it's too harsh of a penalty because if you take away the potential, negative health effects of the chemical, right now we're just looking at it as a penalty for the racer and the team, and you can't guarantee that they willfully, purposefully cheated,
Knowingly.
right? We can't prove that, and so it's a kind of we're lowering the penalty for a first time offense in case there was something that like they truly didn't do it right. Now
Mm-hmm.
if you have a second offense within an x amount of time, now becomes a
Yeah.
okay,
S-
there's probably something going on here. So,
And
so
talking
anyway,
about,
point being that there's two reasons, not just one, but two reasons
right.
the penalty was lowered.
And this is
And
all according to Brian Carter. They basically analyzing what I guess, the board
appeals commission,
decided.
yeah,
What I find interesting now, I know it's kind of comparing one series and how they do things in another, but it's just funny that they're saying that it's too harsh of a penalty doing this, whereas we just had Rick Schwally on here and he said their penalty
Is
is
indefinite.
is indefinitely that you're
Mm-hmm.
done.
I don't know. It just seems it opened the door to say people to criticize them and say, well, you just did that so Bobby Pierce could run for points, run for the title.
Well, and I seen a car owner, a pretty a vocal person comment, make the comment or statement that like, how would this have unfolded if you were a regional, local
If you
racer that
weren't
gets caught, right? If you
following the
weren't a
tour,
high,
if points didn't
if
matter.
if you weren't a high profile driver, how would have this situation have been handled? And would it have been the same or worse? Would they have thrown it out or lowered the severity of it for a local guy or a regional guy?
That's not planning on running many World Outlaws or dirt car
right.
events.
That is a very good question. Like, how much did the popularity and significance of the, people involved play, make a difference? And you'd like to think that it wouldn't matter, that they'd have done the same for a nobody or a mid level driver. But sometimes it's not just, you know, it's not just our sport in everything. Whenever it's a high profile person or entity is caught up in something, it leads to change.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas a low profile, I mean, there were people think about, there were plenty of drivers injuries and deaths before Dale Earnhardt got killed. But what really led NASCAR to start implementing,
Right.
containment seats, full face helmets, the Hans devices, all that stuff, was the most popular driver, one of them ever, getting killed in a car, right? Like,
Yeah.
you know, and what I'm saying is kind of that's just the nature of
It takes a
everything.
high profile, highly talked about
Yes,
situation to make
lead
make
to
a change.
Yeah.
The question is it good change or bad? And
Okay.
I think
Is
I
it
don't
good
know.
or
The
bad? Do
jury
you
is
agree
still
or
out.
disagree?
I don't know. I will say this. I think what we can confidently say from this whole thing is no one trusts the process, right? There's no, there's well, I don't say no one. There's
Yeah.
very little trust and confidence in the process of checking tires, in our sport. But if you talk to drivers, every single one you talk to thinks there's guys doing it, right? So
Mm-hmm.
cheating tires. So it's not like these tests are bogus and no one's doing it. It's more of we just don't. There's guys doing it. We know they are. We just don't trust the process of checking it, right?
Yep.
And
Okay. I
anytime, go ahead.
I want to just say, like, if we're saying that we don't trust the process, they went to this committee, they went to the appeal, and they literally said, "Hey, we're going to trust and uphold this process,
Just not the
but
penalties.
we're going to kind of reel it in
In
on the
case it's
penalty." Like,
wrong, we're
Yeah.
gonna relax the penalty.
what does that mean? Like,
It did. I think that was a whole nother situation or a whole nother point there is lowering the severity of the penalties implies you don't necessarily trust the process. If
Right.
you think so here's the thing. That board is telling us, yep, we're pretty sure these guys knew the rule and cheated, but we're going to lessen what the rule book said is the penalty. Why would
Yeah.
you do that? If I get it, we should change the rule. But I feel like we should change the rule in the future, not now. You know what I mean? If
Right.
we feel like it's too severe.
Well, I don't think the appellate commission is involved in the rulemaking process. Right?
Yeah.
Like it might be their way of saying, "Hey, World Racing Group, your penalty's too stiff. We're going to back it down." Right?
Mhm.
Like, or we think you should. And so, as
We're going to do it for you.
Think about, like, again, we keep making references to case law here and the legal system, but think about how there are things that are literally laws that get changed through the legal process,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, it's setting a precedent, right? A
Yeah.
precedent law. That's kind of how what this is, it was appealed to, this higher court who said that law, we're striking down that law
Mm-hmm.
essentially. And they said they didn't say we're striking down the rule. They're backing the rule. They're just striking down or rolling back the penalty
Right.
for it a little bit because again, we can debate
Yeah.
it, but I think, and this is where maybe a more clear report from that commission, like an actual statement where
Mm-hmm.
they could have, but it's hard for someone to look at this with a reasonable, even unbiased mind is think they're not that they're rolling it back because there's questions about the process, right? That's not the reason they're rolling it back. And again, what it does is I was going to mention this earlier is when you have that doubt in the process is now anyone gets caught and they can just
The first
oh
time you got one to give.
Got a freebie.
right, like you can claim I didn't do anything. It's like we've now made it where you can't try if there's so much doubt in the process that people are going to automatically you can release a statement and and you can probably get people to believe you, right? um and I don't know that's a good place for us to be. I do like the idea of I can see why you'd want to hey, first I think I can be convinced that a first time offender, we can, I'm not saying give them the benefit of the doubt, but at least maybe say that could have been something else going on there, right? Like we're not going to make it as harsh, but if it happens again, it's
All
significant,
right.
right? Like
Here's
I can maybe be convinced of that.
here's one thing I will say to that. Kyle Bronson, one of the three, got popped less than 6 months ago by the
Yeah.
same lab. Different series,
Yes.
Crate Racing
So
USA at Alltech. Uh,
yeah,
full disclosure, it moved Joseph up a spot to finish third at the Powell Family
Powell.
Memorial. But Kyle Bronson, one of the ones in question here, got popped less than 6 months ago, back in October 2023, by the same lab.
Right.
So there's some of that clarity or whatever, or working together, I guess, that Schwally was talking about earlier this week. Like, I feel like if we're using that same lab, that result should be taken into question here. You know what I'm saying? Like, but that's where they're going with this. If you're a repeat offender, chances are you didn't have a mistake twice.
Yeah. So that's where okay, if that's what the approach we're going to take is you have one to give, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like everyone gets it's not a freebie. They still,
but it's no worse than other than the fine, $1,000. Which a whole nother question: why is Bobby Pierce having to pay more of a fine than the other guys? That makes no sense. He's paying a $2,000 fine where the other guys are paying $1,000.
That should have been
why
that should have been clear. I'm assuming maybe something in the
he was less convincing
in his testimony.
Yeah.
Like I mean it needed to have been said, right? There needed to have been a report from the commission explaining the decisions they made. I applaud World Racing Group for having an appeals commission, but this is so important in our sport. What is almost like the Supreme Court. We need to know what they were thinking and why they ruled the way they did.
It's saying World Outlaws show and rules versus DIRTcar.
That's what I was about to say.
We need a process that is pretty much across the board, standardized across the board, that everyone helps, or not everyone, but like representatives from all parties, all groups involved here come to an agreement on how it should work, how we're doing it, and we all use the same process. And if you're caught on one, that applies, same penalties go all the way across, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you're caught, it gets significantly more, the penalties increase harsh,
severity,
right? As if you get caught again.
Yeah.
I just think that's the only way we're ever going to get and that's the reason I asked Rick Schwally whenever he was on here, and I'm going to talk to others about it involved. I think we need a standardized process that is across the board the same in dirt late model racing, right? And if you're caught with one, it's just like being caught with the other. And there's no question in it saying, well, we can't support their finding
because they use a different lab,
or they use a different lab
or process.
No, we're gonna standardize the process, and maybe it's an independent tech, right? I don't know. Like if we're gonna do this, that's the way it's gonna have to be. Until that's done that way, there's always gonna be questions around it.